know if your husband is caught in porn's cycle of shame? Well, where do you start? When Dave and I were dealing with his pornography addiction, the first thing we had to do was admit that there was a problem. He had to admit it, and so did I. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, it's really not. And there is more to it than that. You see, in any addiction, including pornography addiction, there's a cyclical pattern that you need to start to identify and to deal with. Dave refers to this as his cycle of shame. And that's what he used to describe what it felt like to be trapped in pornography's addiction. Well, if you hop over to my website in the blog post, you're going to see an image that we created to illustrate what this felt like to be in the pornography cycle of shame. I'm going to show it to you here, and I know you can't read it, but it will be over on my website at kirstendsamuel.com. But I want to unpack this pornography cycle of shame for you today. The first thing is there's a trigger that causes the addict to go look for pornography, usually on the internet. Today, that's the most common place that the addict is going to look for. And there's usually something behind it. Now, we've coined this B-halt. You've heard of HALT before, hurt, angry, lonely, and tired. Well, Dave added one to it, and that was bored, because this was one thing that he found was a trigger for him. So we call it B-halt, bored, hurt, angry, lonely, or tired. Identifying the source is necessary for you to begin to break the cycle of the pornography addiction. Well, the next thing that happens, of course, is you're looking at the pornography and you get this huge hormonal rush, but it's temporary. The addict gets what they're looking for, and the brain gets that dopamine, or not dopamine, but the rush of chemicals that help, that stimulate the brain. You know, there's studies that are out there now that shows that an addict's brain response is not the same as a normal brain response. In fact, there's a great article over on covenanteyes.com. It's called Your Brain on Porn, and I would encourage you to go and download that and read that article. So in order to break the addictive cycle, we have to begin to identify the neurological issues that are created by the addiction. They're real. Well, like any addiction, after you've gotten that hormonal rush, all of a sudden shame sets in. It wouldn't be an addiction if there wasn't shame attached, right? Why would you feel shame if there wasn't an addiction? That feeling, when that happens, can drive you back into that trigger of being, hurt, angry, lonely, or tired. It probably triggers anger. And you're going to continue to feed the addiction. The brain wants that addiction. Well, then what happens is what Dave calls getting into a funk. I call it the negative attitude. And I remember when this would happen for him. And he'd be down and negative about just about anything for several days. And I would try to help him feel better or try to snap him out of it. But it didn't work, and then I'd just get frustrated and tell him to, just get over it. But when you're in the cycle of shame, this negative behavior begins a spiral, which can throw you deeper into the addictive behavior. Often you need to seek professional help with a coach, a counselor, or probably even some medical intervention, any kind of a trained professional to help you begin to break the cycle. Well, then Dave would say he'd get to a point where he was ready to confess to God that he had done this again and ask for forgiveness. And the Bible tells us that when we confess our sins, God is able and willing and does forgive us of our sins. But if we only give lip service to that confession and we don't change our behavior, we haven't done anything. And this is a key component of recovery from a pornography addiction. The cycle continues if we don't take the action step to break the cycle. So once that confession had occurred, then Dave says that he would feel like things were getting back to normal. And it's kind of a sigh of relief at this point. But it's a false hope, because there's no going back to the way things were in the normal world, because that's what got you into this pornography addiction in the first place. We have to identify what it was in that normal world that triggered you so that we can truly break the cycle of pornography. And then as you're feeling like you're getting back into a normal setting and you turn back to God to try to restore the relationship, it's a wonderful time of basking in the forgiveness that God does extend. King David wrote about this when he asked God to restore his relationship with God after he had sinned. And it's a great thing to do, and it is true, and it is honest, and it's a sigh of relief. But that sigh of relief is short-lived, because this cycle can last anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to a few months. You could be in this feeling of being restored and healing and believing that you truly are on the path to healing, and then all of a sudden there's a new trigger. And when that happens, that cycle repeats again, and you're caught in it because we haven't done the hard work of dealing with the root issues. So if you've taken the first step to admit the problem, or your husband has taken the first step to admit the problem, and you're working together to try to overcome the pornography addiction, you've done a great thing. You have started on the road to recovery. Congratulations. I'm excited for you because it is there. But for the addict, and even for you as the wife of the addict, if you could have done this on your own, you already would have. The problem is that this cycle continues until we deal with what's going on behind the issues. You do need to get professional help to help you unpack what's going on. And if your husband is the one who is addicted to porn, it does affect you. It's not just a deal with it yourself and he needs to deal with it and I'm okay. You're not okay. I know, I've been there. And I remember what it felt like, the punch in the gut that I got when Dave revealed his pornography addiction. I remember those feelings of worthlessness and fear and anxiety. I needed help just as much as Dave did to recover. And the good news for you is that you can find healing, because I do know what that feels like, and I know how the aftershocks reverberated through my body. There is pain, but you can heal. And I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to help you begin that road of recovery. You can go over to KirstenDSamuel.com. Kirsten is spelled Kirsten, D as in Diane, Samuel, SAMUEL.com, and click on that big blue button right there on the home page, right on the top right. Let's sit down and talk about how you can recover in specific ways and rediscover who you were created to be. Until next time.